This is KTFS 1400 Texarkana. It's 5:20.
Here's the KTFS 2020 news for people with vision.
Artillery from the communist side has been pounding American positions south of the demilitarized zone between the two Vietnams. The firing that continued throughout the South Vietnamese voting killed 8 U.S. Marines and wounded 20.
The conflict in Vietnam, spurred on by the Gulf of Tonkin incident, is on its way to becoming a full-scale war. Small numbers of advisors become tens of thousands of fighting men as the nation continues to expand its involvement in a war few Americans understand. The U.S. intends to remain in Vietnam just long enough for the South Vietnamese government to organize and train its own military forces to stand under its own power. But as tensions mount, President Lyndon B. Johnson and his administration struggle to find the right level of involvement, hoping to contain the communist threat coming down from North Vietnam. As soldiers make landfall, 1965 is the year the Vietnam War truly begins. U.S. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara visits South Vietnam in March 1964. But the 1963 coup and execution of South Vietnamese President Ngo Dinh Diem has set off multiple failed attempts at military and civilian governments. The country's political instability creates a greater vulnerability, one exploited by the growing Viet Cong. The situation is dire, the country a powder keg, getting more and more agitated by the minute. In late 1964, the U.S. increases its air and naval forces in Southeast Asia. North Vietnamese Army troops move into position along the border of South Vietnam's central highlands.
In fact, I saw one night where some guys were shooting rockets at Quang Tri City down in the valley, and we sent some infantry guys down there, and then they come back, they couldn't find anybody, and a little bit later, you see the rockets going off again, so we shoot some artillery down there and get quiet for a little while, and then you see some more rockets going off. How are these guys surviving, you know? Then they brought the Cobras in, they brought tactical air in, they dropped bombs in that place, and then a little while later, you still see the rockets going off. Well, then we put a couple batteries of artillery on it and really shot. Probably cost a lot of money, but we got them.
U.S. troops will fight in an unusual war against an unusual enemy, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. The North Vietnamese Army, or the NVA, began as a group of 31 men and 1 woman in 1944. They quickly grew into a formidable army, gaining concentration and troops as Vietnam separated into North and South. The U.S. supplies the South Vietnamese with weapons and armament. The North Vietnamese have China and the Soviet Union. While less equipped, the Viet Cong, the South Vietnam-based military branch of the Communist National Liberation Front, are no less formidable through their mastery of their local terrain and guerrilla tactics. The Viet Cong do possess uniformed soldiers, but it is the non-uniformed guerrillas who define the battlefields of South Vietnam. Many guerrillas are young teenagers. Some are idealistic, while others are shamed or pressured into joining. The average Viet Cong guerrilla, known as Charlie to U.S. troops, receives little training, but they are given a month of advanced training if promoted into a main unit. In 1965, Ho Chi Minh dictates a new way for the guerrillas to fight. Rather than attack American forces directly, they are to engage in hit-and-run attacks to wear the enemy down. But where do they run to? Strategically, Viet Cong have the hometown advantage, one that goes beyond their infiltration of South Vietnamese villages. Their inclusion of hidden underground tunnels and complexes allow them to literally pop up out of the ground, attack, and then disappear. On top of that, crude and effective homemade booby traps litter the South Vietnamese landscape. Villages that are secretly sympathetic to the Viet Cong require every villager to dig 3 feet a day. The addition of underground kitchens, sleeping quarters, and medical stations, as well as stores of food and weapons, means a Viet Cong soldier can survive underground for possibly weeks at a time. Many of the troops are armed with Chinese imitations of the Russian AK-47 submachine gun, as well as various Soviet and Chinese attack rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and recoilless rifles. One of the first true assault rifles, the AK-47, was designed by a Soviet World War II veteran, modeled on the Nazi Sturmgewehr 44. A hybrid of other weapons, such as the M1 Garand and M1 carbine, the AK-47 combines the efficiency of these other weapons with the deadliness of its design. Less liable to jam than the M16 and easy to clean, the AK-47 becomes standard gear for the Viet Cong and NVA. The air war over Vietnam. American forces revel in their greater air power. On the ground, troops grow beyond the Cold War into the modern Army of the 1960s.
I took my infantry training down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and that was grueling, to say the least. Anybody who knows anything about Fort Polk will agree. Life was miserable there, pure hell, and I was pretty tough. All of us were by the time we graduated from infantry school there.
I went to Pensacola right after graduation, and I did pretty well all the way through. I ended up getting jets, which is what everybody wanted, and but the Navy has a lot more patrol pilots and helicopter pilots than it does tactical fighters, and so I had to work pretty hard. But I got them. A handful of the very senior instructors, the commanders, and some of the senior lieutenant commanders had flown in combat in Korea. But that was, the end of 1952, and we hadn't had any real stuff happening until Vietnam started. They had the little things in Lebanon, and some other carriers were used for interdiction a few times, but there wasn't anything big. So nobody had any combat experience. We didn't even think about that. But that's what we were training for, so we kind of, bring it on. We wanted to do it.
We went to Fort Sam Houston for basic training, where we got a uniform, learned to salute, that type of thing, and then orders for our next duty station. Just learned to march, to salute, pretend that we were in the military. When I was there were 300 nurses and 500 doctors, and the doctors were not happy about being there. They were like Hawkeyes in MASH. They had been drafted, and they were just doing their time.
Well, I got drafted in July 1967, and I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey.
I went to basic training in June of 1968. Went to Great Lakes Training Center in Illinois, and you went through your basic program of learning seamanship and things like that that was required at the time. It wasn't until after I finished boot camp that I got more training to go to Vietnam.
We had one man in our basic training who was an assistant cook that was very scary, and he was straight out of Deliverance, and I heard that sometime later he ended up stabbing somebody, and with the times that I was on KP, I never turned my back on him.
Standard issue weaponry at the start of the war is the M14, first put into service in July of 1959. Production delays keep American forces from being fully equipped with the M14 until July 1965. The early days of the Vietnam War will test the strengths and weaknesses of the rifle. The wooden stocks on early models swell with the jungle humidity, affecting accuracy. Automatic recoil is intense enough to make it uncontrollable in combat and impossible to aim. The length and weight of the rifle becomes burdensome in the thick brush of the jungles. Its replacement, authorized by Robert McNamara in 1966, is the M16. The lightweight rifle, coming in at 6 pounds, loaded, has a small caliber 5.56 NATO cartridge. What seemed shortcomings to many soldiers are actually equalizers, but field tests come up with a startling conclusion. 8 men armed with M16s carry the same level of firepower as an 11-man team with M14s. There are setbacks in the early days of the M16, however, ones that prove fatal. The apparently self-cleaning rifles jam in early field tests. The M16 also suffers from failure to extract, as dirt and corrosion from both gunpowder and oil cause cartridge casings to jam in the barrel and prevent further firing. The M16A1 is issued soon after, a model that corrects the fatal flaws of the M16. The chrome-lined chamber and bore, as well as the cleaning supplies included, help reduce failure to extract incidents and battlefield-related deaths. Heavier arms are also needed on the battlefield, which is where the M60 machine gun comes in. Known as the Pig for its sheer bulk, the belt-fed machine gun requires teams of 2 or more to operate it. Then there's the M79 grenade launcher, known as Thumper, and the Bloop tube for its distinct report. The M79 fires a diversity of 40mm rounds, be they explosive, smoke, or illumination. This highly accurate launcher has a range of 350 meters. The single-shot design, however, can be a drawback in battle. The fastest a grenadier can reload and fire is 6 rounds a minute. In close-quarters combat, grenadiers only have a pistol and knife to rely on, not an assault rifle like most of their enemies, and they are at a tactical disadvantage. The M203 grenade launcher attachment also comes out during the Vietnam War, allowing attachment to a variety of assault rifles. The M203 makes switching between both weapons effortless and streamlined for the GIs fighting in unpredictable fields of combat.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.